Imagine discovering that most of your life has been guided by forces you barely recognize. You wake up every morning convinced that you are the decision maker. You believe your thoughts originate from you, your choices feel deliberate. Your personality feels solid and defined. It appears as though you sit confidently at the steering wheel of your own consciousness, selecting routes, accelerating toward goals, and avoiding obstacles along the way. But pause for a moment and look inward with honesty. Why do certain fears arise without warning? Why do you react defensively before thinking? Why do you repeat behaviors you promised you would abandon? Why do you sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself? With just a little introspection, an uncomfortable realization begins to form. Perhaps you are not fully steering the vehicle. Perhaps you are following directions issued by a navigation system embedded deep within your mind, one installed long before you understood it, and one that continues to operate whether you examine it or not. You see the dashboard, you hear the instructions, but you rarely inspect the machinery beneath. If you never attempt to understand this inner system, how it was formed, how it operates, and where it intends to guide you, you risk traveling aimlessly. At best, you may arrive somewhere uninspiring. At worst, somewhere damaging. Few thinkers dared to explore this internal terrain as deeply as the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Born in 1875 in a quiet Swiss village, Jung grew up in modest conditions. His father, a pastor, struggled both financially and spiritually. His mother possessed a mysterious temperament that left a strong impression on the young boy. From early childhood, Jung felt inwardly divided, observant, introspective, often alone. While other children immersed themselves in play, Jung gravitated toward imagination and reflection. He experienced vivid fantasies and complex inner imagery. At school, he struggled socially and emotionally, at times becoming physically ill from stress. Yet beneath this sensitive exterior, an intense intellectual curiosity was growing. As he matured, Jung immersed himself in philosophy and religion. He questioned the nature of faith, meaning, and the invisible forces shaping human experience. Rather than pursue theology like his father, he chose medicine, eventually specializing in psychiatry. His career advanced rapidly. He demonstrated remarkable insight into the minds of patients and developed a reputation as a rising intellectual force. This trajectory soon led him to meet Sigmund Freud, the pioneering figure of psychoanalysis. When Jung and Freud first encountered each other, their conversation reportedly lasted for hours without interruption. A powerful intellectual bond formed between them. Freud saw in Jung a potential successor. Jung admired Freud's bold examination of the unconscious mind. Yet beneath their alliance lay profound differences. Freud approached psychology with a strict scientific and biological lens, often emphasizing repression and instinctual drives. Jung sensed that the human psyche extended beyond purely biological explanations. He believed the mind carried symbolic, mythological, even spiritual dimensions. As Jung's ideas evolved, tensions grew. Their relationship, part collaboration, part mentorship, became strained by theoretical disagreements and personal dynamics. Eventually, in 1913, their partnership dissolved. The separation marked a turning point in Jung's life. Following the break, he experienced a period of intense inner turmoil. Rather than suppress his psychological distress, he chose to explore it. He documented dreams, confronted unsettling imagery, and allowed unconscious material to surface. This phase was not comfortable. It was destabilizing, disorienting, and at times frightening. Yet from this descent emerged his most influential concepts. Jung believed that the central aim of human life is not merely achievement or happiness, but wholeness. He called this lifelong psychological journey individuation. To understand this process, one must first understand his model of the psyche. At the most visible level lies consciousness, the realm of awareness. This includes your thoughts, perceptions, memories, and the sense of identity you carry. At the center of consciousness resides the ego. The ego constructs your personal narrative. It organizes experiences into a story that maintains continuity. It says, "This is who I am," but the ego is only a fragment of the total psyche. To function within society, the ego develops what Jung called the persona, the social mask you present to others. The persona adapts to cultural expectations, professional roles, and family norms. It is the polished version of yourself that seeks approval and avoids rejection. You may identify strongly with this mask, your career title, your public image, your moral stance. Yet much of it may be shaped by what you believe is acceptable, rather than what is authentically you. To preserve this curated identity, the ego suppresses traits that threaten it. Insecurity, jealousy, aggression, vulnerability. These elements are often pushed out of awareness. They do not vanish. They sink into the personal unconscious. The personal unconscious stores forgotten memories, unresolved emotions, and rejected aspects of personality. Though hidden, these elements continue influencing behavior. They appear in dreams, sudden emotional outbursts, and recurring patterns. But Jung proposed something even deeper than the personal unconscious. He introduced the concept of the collective unconscious, a universal layer of the psyche shared by all humanity. Unlike personal memories, this layer consists of inherited psychological structures formed over countless generations. Across cultures separated by geography and time, similar myths and symbolic patterns emerge. The heroic journey, the nurturing mother, the wise elder, the trickster, the villain cloaked in darkness. Jung believed these recurring motifs were not accidental. They reflected fundamental psychological blueprints he called archetypes. Archetypes shape perception and behavior at a foundational level. They influence how we interpret experiences, form relationships, and pursue meaning. Among the most powerful of these archetypal forces is the shadow. The shadow contains everything you refuse to acknowledge about yourself. Not only weaknesses, but also unrealized strengths. It holds impulses you judge unacceptable and potentials you fear claiming. When you strongly dislike a trait in someone else, it may signal a projection of your own unexamined qualities. The shadow often reveals itself through intense emotional reactions. Ignoring the shadow does not eliminate it. In fact, suppression grants it greater influence. Unacknowledged anger may manifest as passive aggression. Denied insecurity may appear as arrogance. Repressed envy may turn into criticism. Integration, not denial, is the path toward psychological maturity. Individuation requires confronting these hidden aspects. It demands radical honesty. It asks you to admit that you are capable of contradiction, generosity and selfishness, courage and fear, compassion and resentment. This process is destabilizing because it challenges the ego's preferred image. Yet without it, the unconscious continues directing behavior from behind the curtain. As you integrate the shadow, something transformative occurs. The persona becomes less rigid. The ego grows more flexible. Inner conflict begins to soften. At the core of this integration lies what Jung called the self, the totality of the psyche, encompassing both conscious and unconscious elements. The self represents your authentic center, beyond the mask and beyond the limited story told by the ego. The aim of individuation is alignment between ego and self. This does not mean achieving perfection. It means achieving integration. It means recognizing your complexity rather than fragmenting it. The journey is lifelong. Complete self-knowledge may be unattainable, but increasing awareness brings freedom. Each honest examination of your motives is a step deeper into the unconscious. Each acknowledgement of discomfort reduces its hidden power. Each recognition of projection strengthens responsibility. This path is not easy. To admit that you are not entirely who you believed yourself to be shakes the foundation of identity. To confront internal contradictions requires courage. Yet the alternative is remaining unaware, allowing unseen forces to dictate your path. Jung's work offers neither simplistic optimism nor fatalistic pessimism. It offers responsibility. It suggests that within you lies immense creative potential alongside destructive impulses. It suggests that freedom arises not from controlling the external world, but from illuminating the internal one. When you begin to understand the architecture of your psyche, you notice when your persona is speaking. You detect projection before it escalates. You sense shadow impulses before they act unconsciously. You may never fully control the system, but you gain influence over it. And perhaps the greatest revelation is this: the parts of yourself you most fear may contain the energy required for growth. The traits you suppress may hold keys to authenticity. The darkness you avoid may conceal strength. Once you realize that your conscious identity is only a small fragment of who you are, you can no longer remain complacent. Because if much of your life has been guided by unseen patterns inherited, repressed, and unexamined, what else might be hidden beneath the surface, waiting not to control you, but to be understood? And if you were to truly descend into those depths, what version of yourself might you uncover?